All right, hello and welcome to our first video in the course on PCF Basics. We are very excited to be here with you today. I am Garrett Pierce. I'm a Power Platform developer, and with me today is Charles Channon. Charles, you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Garrett. Like you, I'm a through and through developer on the Power Platform. Been doing this for about 13 years now, and um, I've always had a special place in my heart for the pro code tools. I know a lot of the things we talk about these days are low code and no code stuff, but for me, it's all about the pro dev tooling, and I'm really excited to be able to share a little bit about PCFs today.
Yeah. All right. Well, since you mentioned it, let's start with a question of what exactly is a PCF? Well, PCF stands for Power Apps Component Framework, and that framework is something that pro devs and app makers can use to create code components for model-driven and canvas apps within the world of Power Apps. These code components are used to enhance the user experience for people who work with data in Power Apps. Um, and Charles, do you have anything to add there?
Sure. I mean, the most important thing to add is that functional understanding, right, of what a
Mhm.
PCF is. It's not just a piece of code. It's a way of creating a custom experience. It's a substitute for what we used to do with HTML web resources, but as a
Yeah.
substitute, it provides way more capability, more speed to develop, more flexibility. And as you'll see as we go through this, it's just kind of an objectively superior substitute for
Mhm.
those older controls.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start off today, we're actually going to build a simple Hello World PCF and
Yeah.
discuss all that it takes to do that. So this will show you the basics of creating a PCF and the tooling used to create a PCF. So starting off, I've got Microsoft's official documentation on creating your first component here. We're not going to be following this necessarily, but I will use it for a couple of things, such as the prerequisites that you'll need in order to create a code component using the PCF framework. So starting off, we'll actually need Visual Studio Code, which is a text editor built by Microsoft, and in our opinion, Charles and I, the best way to be writing code, especially if you're trying to do a PCF sort of thing. So go ahead and get that downloaded. Second, and this is something that is really important for the Visual Studio Code part of things, is make sure you have the Power Platform Tools extension for VS Code.
Yeah.
That's also going to be really important. It's going to unlock the Power Platform CLI, which is the command line interface, and that's going to be really important. We'll actually show you just how important that is here in only a minute or two.
Yeah.
Third,
I
you're
want
going
to
to
call
need,
out. Well, I
yeah,
want
go
to call
ahead.
out
I'm
before
sorry.
you move on, Garrett, that the Power Apps CLI itself can be installed without the Visual Studio Code tooling, but the
This is
Visual
true.
Studio Code tooling will give you automatic updates, and
Hmm.
that's what really makes it so much better, right? Every time you open Visual Studio Code, it'll update for you. And that's just because they're always releasing new things for the Power Apps CLI, and
Hmm.
you just really want to be able to benefit from those. So it's definitely the right way to do it.
Yeah. So our third tool that we'll need is Node.js. If you're a developer, you may already have this actually, but you'll want to get the LTS long-term support version that's currently out, and yeah, that's what you'll need. That'll come with the Node package manager, which will become pretty important for getting things like React into our project. And then finally, you will need the .NET build tools, which you can get in two ways. The first, and my preference, is to just get the .NET SDK, or it comes bundled with Visual Studio, which you can get for free through the Community Edition, or you can pay for a subscription if you so desire. Um, so once we've got all those tools up and installed, we should be ready to rock and roll. So I've actually got, you may have noticed already that I've got VS Code open here in my right window. Um, and I am in a folder called Hello World, I think it's Hello World Demo PCF. And we need to go ahead and get this to not be empty. You'll notice that the folder is actually completely empty. There's not a single file in here. So there's not a whole lot you can do with it right now. So we'll actually jump into our terminal in VS Code here. Um, and once that kicks up, Charles, what do we want to do?
Well, the first thing we're going to need to do is initialize our PCF, right?
Hmm.
Before I do that, I do want to call out that every single command that we're going to go through here today, every command that we'll go through today and otherwise, everything in PAC supports help. So if you
Hmm.
ever forget some of these parameters, we're going to throw out a whole bunch of parameters. Garrett's going to type them down real fast, and you're going to think, oh, I could never memorize that. Don't worry, you don't need to memorize it. So
Hmm.
all you need to know is you can always type help. So, for example, pack help, type it. It'll tell you everything you can do under the pack command, right? Which includes pack PCF. Now we're going to just jump right in. Okay, from here, everything, including pack PCF and everything else you're going to see at every level it supports help. So let's do pack PCF init, and we're going to give it first a framework, which is dash dash framework or dash FW. Yep.
Whoop. If I could learn how to type on my new keyboard, that would be fantastic.
Oh, actually, you know what? We're not going to do a framework. Sorry, we're going to do a basic one, aren't we?
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah. So we'll do actually
Pack
namespace.
ECF init. We'll do namespace. That's
So we'll
right.
just give it sample namespace, and then dash
And
dash
then we'll give it
name,
a dash dash
right?
name.
Which
Mm-hmm.
will just do hello world demo PCF. And then finally dash dash. What's the
Template.
third one? Template.
We'll
That's
do
right.
template.
And then we'll do a field template. This could also be a
That's right.
dataset template. We'll cover what that means in a later video. But for now, we're just going to work on a field template. We'll keep things simple.
Mm-hmm.
And
And then the
then,
last thing we'll do is do a dash npm to
mhm,
simplify our lives so that it's really just one command. That's all we're going to execute,
yep,
and it's all done. Just one command line operation, and
yeah.
it's all done.
You'll notice that it says it's running npm install for you. That means it's actually installing all of our dependency packages. You don't totally need to know what that means. You can find documentation online from people smarter than me, at least, that'll tell you what npm install does. But what you basically need to know is it's saving you a lot of time and effort.
A lot of
And
time.
isn't that something that we just love as developers? So,
That's right. That's
um,
right.
you may now notice actually that we've got some files here, and we didn't have any files before, so that's pretty exciting. First off, we'll want to jump into control manifest.input.xml. And Charles,
Mhm.
what are the essential things that we need to know about control manifest.input.xml?
Sure. So we've got a lot of wide diversity of developers in the Power Platform. Some people have come from an M365 background, some haven't. If you have come from that background, then you're going to kind of understand the idea of a manifest. But if you haven't, a manifest allows you to declare up front what's in your control because there could be a lot of things. In this case, the manifest allows us to define what the control is, how we've named it,
Mm-hmm.
what other services we might use, what properties we might want for input or output purposes, any resources that we need to use along the way, and any utilities we need to use in order to make it execute.
Mm-hmm.
In our case, we're going to just sort of leave this manifest totally vanilla for our hello world purposes, but in later discussions, we'll definitely go through in detail and explain to you exactly how an input property differs from an output, differs from a bound, what the different resource types are, and so on. We'll go into more
Yeah.
detail later.
Yeah. And so right now we'll actually notice that we've got something under our resources. We've got a code resource called index.ts, and you'll notice that's actually right alongside our control manifest. So I'm going to jump right into that file here. And it's not empty, but it's, kind of, in terms of vibe, it's empty because there's not a whole lot in these functions here. So, we'll go through, for the remainder of this video, we're going to go through briefly what all of these functions do, and then we'll take a short break, and then we'll actually get our hands dirty with some code. So, starting off, we've got our init function. Charles, do you want to go
Yeah.
ahead and tell us what the init function does?
Well, yeah, I mean, as any developer probably knows right away, an init is run one time and only one time when the platform is ready for you.
Hmm.
Now, all of the functions that are here inside the index are intended to be called by the platform. You can think of your index as your interface that you're offering to the model-driven app or Canvas app platform so that it knows where to call into your code when certain events happen. Well, one of those events is when it's first ready for your control.
Hmm.
Init is for that. A lot of times you might put nothing at all in your init event, and that's okay. But if there are operations that you want to run once and only once during initialization, this is where they'd go.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. So let's actually make a jump. I'll have you also cover update view, and then I'll talk about get outputs. So
Sure.
Charles, tell us about update view real quick.
Sure. So update view, similar to init, is one of those interfaces, one of those functions that's called by the platform. This one just happens to be called anytime any data that you care about might have changed. So if you think back to that manifest that we looked at, we had one sample property and we kind of just left it alone. But you
Hmm.
might put a lot of properties in there. You might tell the platform, hey, I care about this and this and this and this. Those properties might be individual columns and fields, or they might be entire data sets. Update view is going to get called by the platform anytime any one of those might have been changed so that you're getting the latest and greatest all the time. This is usually where the bulk of your logic is going to reside.
Hmm. That's a great explanation. Yeah. So then I'm going to take a quick jump into get outputs, which is our next function here. It's actually not required, and you may notice it's the only one of these functions that actually has any real code in it. Which by real code I mean return blank. But the get outputs function is going to run whenever your component is preparing to receive new data, and it'll return an object with the data defined in the manifest. It kind of runs as a response to the system being notified that the output has changed, which is a parameter that you define actually in the init method. So you'll look right here, we've got notify output changed. That talks to get outputs. And then finally, we've got our last function, which is destroy. So Charles, do you want to give a little bit on that?
Sure. There's a lot of complexity to React code, but what's important to know is that it's possible for what's known as state within React components to persist in a browser session. Sometimes you're going to want state to persist, and sometimes you won't. Sometimes you want it to clear completely between instances of this control. By using the destroy code, the destroy function, you can give your operation somewhere to go in order to unload your component entirely when you think it's appropriate. Many times you won't, but sometimes you will find it useful.
Yeah. All right, so that is our quick overview of getting a PCF set up. In the next video, we'll start to cover how to actually implement some of these things. But for now, we're going to take a little break, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much for joining us today.